What is good, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us once again on a tasty episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast. Today we have a wonderful guest and dear friend, Kenna Warren. And yeah, Kenna, can you give us in a nutshell before we get into some coffee, who you are?
Totally.
In a couple words. I don't know. What's one fun fact about you?
Ooh, fun fact. I'm never good at fun facts, but short little tidbit on me.
Yeah.
I live here in Bellingham.
Nice.
I have spent most of my career working for nonprofits and ministries. And yeah. That's
there
pretty
it is,
much who I
folks.
am. Because we'll get into the rest later. I got to keep you on your
100%.
toes.
Yeah. And yeah, that was fun enough. So, well, Kenna, do you have any coffee background?
I worked at Woods Coffee for about 3 months one time.
3 months.
Yeah.
And I was really bad at it and I hated it. And so I didn't last long. And then I worked at a little dessert shop called Pure Bliss.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
And I worked mostly there on the bar doing coffee. So they're not like known for their coffee or anything, but they had Mocha Joe. It was good coffee and I loved that. That was really fun.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Pure Bliss is cool. I like it.
Just down the block here.
Yeah.
I feel like their cookies kind of like dominate the Bellingham bakery scene.
Yeah.
It's like almost everywhere you go, their cookies. I actually just bought Deja some cake from there.
Oh, it's the
carrot cake.
best cake in the
Carrot
whole
cake.
world.
Yeah. I don't know. I like the chocolate cake, but I've kind of been rolling with the carrot cake. Deja loves the carrot cake.
The vegan carrot cake is next
Yes.
level. Like even if you're not vegan.
They also have this thing called the Russian tea cake.
Yes.
It's like a small little tea cake. The first time I encountered them was when I worked behind the bar at Primer. And we had them and they were like this. It was just weird because I had this I don't like them, but honestly, something just keeps me coming back for them, and I'm kind of liking them. And we had this regular who would get like a cappuccino with a tea cake, and Eric? It was just like a vibe. No, he's kind of the guy with the shaggier hair a little bit.
I mean, we have a crossover of regulars from the time that he worked
Yeah.
at Primer to the time now at Narrative.
I imagine.
So it's pretty cool.
I imagine.
5 years later, I always have this awkward nod of oh, I think we know each other.
Was it the guy who drives a Tesla?
No.
Bellingham is like this because I had crossover regulars of people who'd go to Pure Bliss all the time, and Jono, my husband, worked at Camber, and we would have the same regulars. There's just only so many people here.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool part.
Well, what we have right here, brewing, we have a decaf. It's not released yet, I don't think, but it's going to
it's
soon
not?
in the near future. Yeah, I don't know why we have it.
We sold it to someone.
Yeah,
We
did.
sold
to Joel.
To Joel
We
Swick.
have some friend.
He's an insider.
Yeah, insider. Yeah. So.
Oh, I can't wait to be part of this ASMR.
It was too quiet. It's like a non-slurpy sip. Non-breathing.
Delicious coffee.
We get a bad rap for the fact that we're never satisfied with our cup on the podcast.
That's what I was thinking as I listened to like 2 Mirror podcast episodes within the last week, and both of them you guys were like, oh, this is bad. And like,
Oh, yeah.
I was like, if I like it, should I not say that?
Yeah, don't.
I mean, we basically create a character.
Yeah.
Out of, like,
it's
like
alter
every
ego.
podcast, has that character, and we're like the folks who don't like coffee when we brew it. I don't know. It's weird, but it's funny.
Can I guess what notes are in this, and you guys can tell me
Yes.
if I'm right?
That would be
Okay,
fun.
hold on 1 second. Let me focus.
The silence is so suspenseful.
Mm-hmm. I'm so scared. I'm gonna be wrong.
No.
There's no such
Is
thing as
it
wrong.
floral?
That's a stretch. This is not really a floral coffee.
This might be the best. If
So
it has
one of the-
floral,
Hazelnut?
it may be the
What?
best decaf I've ever had.
Hazelnut?
Hazelnut?
Oh.
Okay, maybe.
Hazelnut?
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
I could roll
closer.
with that. That's closer.
I mean, what do we have on there?
I think on the bag we have shoot, I forgot. We have a couple
Stone
of
fruit?
stone fruit for sure. More like a
Chocolate?
Is it cacao or chocolate? I think we put chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm tasting right now is actually, it has nice acidity. So
Certainly.
when I'm tasting coffee, I'm like breaking it down by sweetness and acidity. So first I focus on what does this acidity remind me of? Is it an apple? Is it like a citrus, orange? Is it a lemon? Or is it a strawberry? Those are all levels of acidity. So I break it down, like what kind of acidity am I perceiving? And then I go into what kind of sweetness I'm perceiving. So they cross over because not all acidity is acidic. There's a little bit of sweetness in acidity, like a strawberry, right? Acidic, but sweet. And then that moves into maybe deeper sweetness like chocolate or even farther like, molasses, cacao. And then you're getting into bitterness.
Okay. So I'm getting a little lesson.
Cool.
I know a bit about wine tasting, and it's like there's some similar things, but wine is a lot easier for me.
Yeah, because wine has less. Mark, you know the stats on that. Give us the stats again.
It's wine has, I think, around like something. I'm gonna butcher this, but it's like it has around like 400 flavor and aroma compounds.
Oh my word!
And coffee actually has like over 800.
Yeah,
so it's like twice as
harder
complex
to pick
and
up
nuanced.
on.
Yeah. So either harder to pick up on, or the flip side could be just that like there's more like nuance to it, which means like not everybody's gonna agree on the same thing, so to speak. At least that's how I see it. But but that being said, this would be a hard coffee to pick up notes on because it's a decaf, and decafs.
It's not my fault.
No, really, because decafs come with, I mean, a part of the industry that we're in, of specialty coffee, decaf is kind of like.
You've probably seen Death Before Decaf, huh? Have you
like
seen that
in a
floating
sticker
around?
and stuff.
Sticker,
Like yes, I have.
Yeah. So yeah.
But did you do the decaf for me because you didn't know?
Yes, I did the decaf because I didn't know if you could take
hospitable.
caffeine this late.
Yeah.
So I mean we've recorded podcasts at like 11:30 p.m.
Yeah.
and drinking like a carafe.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so
I think I could do that too. I'm pretty hardcore.
Nice.
I don't have a lot of knowledge like you guys do, but I do love coffee and drink a lot of it.
Yeah, because from what I know, you regularly drink coffee.
Absolutely.
Like, every morning. Like
every
what's
morning,
your coffee
every
routine?
afternoon. You're not going to love this.
No, I will. I promise.
Okay. When I wake up, my husband Jono usually will have made me a pour over with 1 shot of espresso in it. So that's what I'll drink while I get ready. Mm-hmm. And then on the way to whatever I'm doing, I'll get 3 shots of espresso on ice at a drive-through coffee stand.
It's a lot.
And yes, it is a lot. I usually don't drink my full first cup of coffee. I just like the way it tastes in the morning. I don't want a whole cup. So he makes me like a tiny little one, and I don't even usually drink all of that.
Interesting.
And then I get my 3 shots of espresso. I do drink all of that.
Wow.
And then I'll often go to like Make Worth or Cafe Blue in the afternoon and maybe just get some drip.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's actually a substantial amount of coffee. Do you drink coffee before you eat? Or is it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
It's probably not healthy.
I don't know if that's common, though. I think a lot of folks would have, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of folks would eat first and then drink coffee or drink coffee with their food. Maybe I'm just guessing.
I think that's much better for you to do it that way. Better for your hormones.
I definitely don't do that. I'm like my first meal is coffee, and then my snack after the first meal is coffee, and then I'm like, why is my brain turning off? Oh, nice! It's like 8 hours after I've woken up. I need to eat something. So, that's
same boat.
Your routine reminds me of Victory's, a friend of ours.
Oh yes. So. I think she's cut back quite a bit in recent times, but yes, she used to drink like up to 10 shots of espresso a day.
What?
Yeah. Not all at once. Obviously, like in different types of coffee drinks and things
all
like
at
that.
Once or not, that's not good.
No, it was a lot, which is why I think maybe she's cut back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of the ritual of it, though. I mean, you guys get that. Like, I think that's what it was for her. And that's what my coffee stand coffee is for me. It's not so much because I just had a coffee. It's not that I'm like, oh, I need my morning coffee. It's just like, I love my ritual of going through the coffee stand.
Yeah. It's an experience. It's a culture. It's a,
because from really what I've heard is you even have like a decent connection with your drive-through baristas. Yeah.
Very good connection. Yeah. Yes.
What does that look like? Because I rarely go through a drive-through. I mean, I work in a cafe.
Yeah.
I own a roasting company.
Right.
It's like, but what does that look like? How do you foster that kind of relationship? Because the idea of drive-thrus are super fast, right? So is it kind of like speed dating or what? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, great question. Yeah. So the drive-thru I go through is actually, I wouldn't say the idea is necessarily for it to be super fast. So I go to Cool Beans in Bellingham, and
that's cool. Is that on like Lakeway?
There's one on Lakeway. That's the one I go to, but they have I think 4 locations in Bellingham. Okay. And a friend of mine owns it. And they're not super trying to be really fast. I mean, she might disagree, but that's just not the vibe. Like when I worked at Woods, part of the reason I hated it is because you had to get them from the time they reached the line to the time they left 3 minutes. And you were supposed to have a conversation with them. And I was like, that feels really inauthentic. Right. I mean, no shade on Woods, but I just was like, how am I supposed to do that? It was so stressful for me. Versus kind of my ritual of coffee stand. It's the same barista every day. Her name is Mary. She's so lovely. Cool. And you're next to her the whole time she's making your coffee, like by definition. It's not like you pay and then you walk down the bar and wait for it from somebody else. You like, she's like, oh, hey, Kenna, like, and if she sees me a couple cars behind, she'll get my coffee ready. And so it's there. And then we just get to talk like the whole time the cart is being run. It's on this like old school machine. So it like takes forever. And so, you know, we just know each other and, you know, on my birthday, like she knew it was going to be my birthday when it was going to be my birthday. And so she had like already made my coffee and given it to me for free. And just like all the things that I was telling her the other day, I was like, I see you more than I see a lot of my friends because I come here every day, which is probably true for a lot of people with their baristas. And it's just cool because your proximity, like your physical proximity, you're literally next to them the whole time, the whole experience, which I just love.
See, that's like a different, what you're describing is a different experience than what I'm used to, or the preconceived idea of a drive-through cafe. And that's like, you know, crush through a drink, like sling some Spro, toss in a cup and go, like Starbucks model, right?
Right.
But what you're talking about is actually just regular old cafe experience. Like that's what I do at Narrative. You know what I mean? That's how I spend time with people, is literally like that. So that's actually like very interesting for me because that's kind of what the third wave coffee model is about. Like it's making that connection, also focusing on coffee, but like hospitality is always paramount. And it seems to me like you're getting very, very good like hospitality and customer service through a drive-through, which is excellent. Like, so that's dope.
They also roast their own coffee in the stand, which is super cool.
Stand?
Yeah.
Wait,
like,
what?
Roast it within, like in the back of the stand.
I had did you know that? I had no idea that Cool Beans. I mean, I think Jono told me.
I'm puzzled right now. I'm caught off guard.
Yeah, I'm totally
I did not see that comment coming.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Alrighty, folks. That was a great, some small talk for 15 minutes. Half the episode.
Everyone's like, why is this girl here?
Told you. I mean, I should stop asking questions.
No, that's great. I think Kenna needed that prolonged introduction. It's delightful. That's why these podcasts are so difficult to get through in like 30 minutes with a guest.
Yeah.
Because it's like with Sergio, it's like everybody knows us. Come on, we can just get into it. But it's like, how do you not have the context?
Totally.
For you? So, that being said, Kenna, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast episode. 15 minutes later. So we wanted to have you on the podcast because I talked to Jono, and that is your husband?
Yes.
Nice. And I talked to him and we just got into a conversation about social entrepreneurship. And I was like, wait, what? Like, his job is so weird and interesting that I'm like, I actually had no idea there was a job like that existed. Like, it's very interesting. But then he also told me that you're also going to school for social entrepreneurship. And then you're kind of working on kind of like a little bit of a business plan or a concept that pairs social entrepreneurship. And really the biggest thing that like resonated with me, and I was like, we need to have you or Jono on, is simply because like, I think Mir started with that concept of, I never put the word social entrepreneurship towards it, but really it started with this deep, love not only just for coffee, but especially love for people and love for people who are working behind this thing that we call coffee beans, you know? And so for us, it was like, that was just like such a big foundational core. And at the end of the day, the big picture of Mir is how do we reflect what's good to the people drinking our coffee, how we roast the coffee, how do we reflect good things to the producer, how do we make our relationship with the producer so pleasing and so personal with them that it goes beyond, a contract that, hey, you need to fulfill this and I'll exchange it for some green paper and we'll call it good. How do we actually go beyond that? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's a little bit of what social entrepreneurship is. Definitely. So please tell us a little bit about, like, what are you going to school for? And can you break down a little bit of what social entrepreneurship actually is?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to. So I'm going to school. I'm getting my master's degree at Pepperdine for social entrepreneurship and change is what it's called. And the degree is really all about how do we design and execute business for the purpose of positive social impact. So typically, especially in America, when we think we want to have a positive social impact, solve some kind of social problem, whether it's homelessness or equitable access to healthy food or whatever it is, we think we have to start a nonprofit to do that. And nonprofits certainly have their place, and there's some social issues where it is the most appropriate answer, but there's some where it's not. And there's some social issues that are not being solved by nonprofits, and that there actually needs to be a market-based solution, because there's something sustainable. Like, by that, I mean the true definition of the word sustainable, like it can be sustained over time. About market-based solutions, because someone with the money to pay is paying for it. And so there's something scalable about that, which means you can actually solve bigger problems because there's money behind it. You're not relying on donors, which is not an endless resource. Whereas consumers are. We're going to keep consuming. And so when you're creating something with transparency and authenticity and a social consciousness to it that people want to consume, whether it's a service or a good or whatever it is, you can actually have the power to solve social problems. And so that's what my degree is all about. And that's kind of what social entrepreneurship is in a nutshell. It's definitely a big term that encompasses a lot of things. Like, some people within the social entrepreneurship space are especially passionate about the environment. Some are especially passionate about labor practices. Like, there's all kinds of different things you can really hone in on. And it's really hard for any company to do all things well. But I would say a social enterprise could very loosely be defined as a company that started for the explicit social mission of, like, solving a problem or improving a community's experience or something like that, as opposed to having the explicit mission of making money.
There's a lot of thoughts and ideas that are running through my head. And I think one of the major ones right now is, what are some, I think for a coffee business, like, because it is such a global trade, it's a big commodity, but within something that big, how do you start, like, and then how do you keep going? I know it's a very general question, but when you're working with, especially, like, bigger issues and bigger problems that are either global or just feel overwhelming when you look at them, but you have a passion to be part of the solution, where do you start?
Yeah, that's exactly the right question. Like, that's such a good question. And I think the place you have to start, and this is actually something that I've really learned in grad school, is you have to start with intimacy with the problem, as opposed to being married to a specific solution. So really, really, a lot of people came into my grad program, myself included, with a hopeful solution in mind, like excited about creating some kind of certain enterprise, whatever you're interested in or whatever you've imagined or dreamed about, and been like, okay, now I have to kind of find the problem this can solve. And actually, for most people and most things, the best place to start is actually getting really, really intimate with the problem, because then you can design a solution that is specifically meant for that problem, instead of trying to retrofit something that you think is going to be good and then gaining clarity and familiarity with the community or the problem and being like, oh shoot, like I'm actually doing more harm than good happens pretty often. And so I think the best place to start is actually a deep familiarity with the problem itself.
Yeah. I love that, because that actually shares that not every problem is the same.
Yeah.
And it instills this concept of, which I've been thinking about a lot, but instills this concept that problems are actually really complex.
Yes.
And oftentimes when we're talking about problems, I mean, business-wise, like on a global scale or something like that, as opposed to, like, oh, like your grinder broke. Big whoop, Right. So those kinds of problems where it's like they actually have so many moving parts in them that you can't just put a blanket statement answer. Oh, like, in coffee, you need to pay farmers more. Well,
right.
Sure. Yeah. But it's a little more complicated than just writing a bigger check to somebody, because there's so much nuance involved. And that's something that, Sergey and I started Mir with, kind of like this concept of building these relationships and making that whole experience for both the roaster, us, and the producer better. But then when we really got involved, we're like now realizing like, oh, it's not just about writing a bigger check. And oftentimes that's kind of what it's kind of like watered down to almost. And it's actually really, really complex.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even your example is great. Like writing a bigger check to the farmer. Well, maybe that can help some things, but like maybe what the farmer needs is actually a certain piece of equipment, or maybe what the farmer needs is actually introductions or whatever it is. And the more you get to know the farmer, like what you guys are actually doing and starting there, the more you can actually be part of the solution in a way that is effective and like truly caring on a human level and not for your brand, but actually for the person.
Good. Yeah. It reminds me of a mentor of mine shared the quote with me that every problem in the world is a relationship problem, which is super cheesy, right? And it seems seems very common, like, oh yeah. But I think the core of that quote is the fact that you have to get to know people in order to solve problems. And you have to, in order to be part of the resolution or a solution, you have to actually like, I don't want to use cheesy terms, but they're all coming to my mind. But you have to embody like the situation, the problem, and the people surrounding it. And I think I wish I would see that more in coffee, because in coffee, I feel like we go to, I hate to be this guy, but I'm going to be this guy, folks.
Oh, God, no.
But I feel like we go to origin trips. We go to origin trips. We snap a bunch of photos. We were only there 3 days. And by we, I'm talking about the industry.
Yeah.
And we were only there for 3 days, snap some photos, come back, and then talk about all of these things about how great the farmer is, how this and this and that. But that's all like textbook knowledge. Yeah. And it's not actually relational knowledge. So I know that's also a broad statement about the coffee industry. And I think things are changing. So that's coffee, but you're actually pursuing fashion. Yeah. So what are some challenges in fashion that you're seeing, and what are some possible solutions if you're there?
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of challenges in the garment industry and the textile industry in general. And it's just like what we're talking about. It's such a big, complex problem. You almost can't boil it down, because once you look at the facts, the truth is, so I talk a lot about living in alignment with your values. And what I kind of mean by that is, like, for instance, I personally really value gender equality. And when you, like, that sounds like, okay, great, and it's easy to talk about, but what does that actually look like in your life? Well, if I value gender equality, and then I learn that 82% of garment workers around the world are women, and only 6% of them make a living wage, what does that mean for the next time that I'm going to buy a piece of clothing? If I value gender equality, like what does it look like for me to do something about that? Even if it's more expensive, even if there's less access to those kinds of garments, even if no one's ever going to know about it, what does it look like to do something about that? And so there's definitely the consumer standpoint and then the brand standpoint. And I embody both. Like
Yep.
I am working on a socially conscious fashion brand. But right now, really what I am is a consumer. And so, there's kind of two avenues you can go down for that question.
Yeah. I really liked what you said about how like you're shopping according to your values. And what I love about that, because it kind of goes back to what you said in the beginning of this conversation, that there's a certain amount of change that you can make as a nonprofit, and there's other changes that you can make as what's the word that you used?
I would call it a for-profit social enterprise.
Yeah. Something that's for profit, where actually the consumer is empowered to say, I have resources that the way that I manage and distribute them can actually make an impact. And you can literally say, here's a $12 coffee and here's a $13 coffee. You're still getting coffee. You're still gonna have caffeine to drink in the morning, but they have ridiculously different implications on the global scale, which I love that, because now your resources, whether you have a little bit or a lot, have insane amount of implications for how they can impact the world through these for-profit industries or whatever. So
I think within fashion, though, my question would be, is that a commodity market then? Or
what do you mean by that?
Is it like, when I'm thinking of commodity, like, is that like a widespread market, or is it more niche towards like, okay, designer clothes, you know what I mean? Or are you talking about also on like the grand scheme of things, just like, I think you were talking, what was the words you used? I used fashion, and then you responded with, what was it, like not clothing, but the actual materials, textiles and garment. Like that sounds to me more of like a broader kind of a bigger industry with broader and bigger problems, maybe with different solutions. And then looking at maybe fashion more of like, okay, designer clothes, or like, I'm a big fan of Jerry Lorenzo, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. That's a little more niche, a little more exclusive, not as commodity based as you would go to Target and just buy clothes. So would you say then within that concept, if you're starting a business, or if you're looking to be part of a solution, how you would observe those issues within different spheres of like commodity or very niche kind of exclusive would be much different, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, one of the biggest things you run up against trying to start a fashion brand, well, and we were talking about this, and I'm sure it's the same with coffee and many industries, is that it is more than twice as expensive to do it ethically. Yeah. It's more than twice as expensive. And so a lot of times what you do run into is quote unquote ethical fashion brands are quote unquote higher end, simply because of their price tag. And so it ends up being more of a niche thing, which something that I really advocate for is actually lessening your consumption overall. And that's actually the biggest impact you can have as a consumer. And then buying less garments that you take really good care of that perhaps are significantly more expensive. And there's a lot of barriers in the way, and there's a lot of, kind of conversations you can have off of that. But that is one thing that I really advocate for to make it less niche, is that even if it's expensive, to simply consume less to make that possible.
Yeah, I think one of the thoughts I'm getting is, so I think I shared with you, like, I love like Nudie jeans, that brand, and it is like expensive. One, it's not accessible for everyone, which limits the amount of people that can be part of the solution, which is a whole nother conversation, or maybe we'll get into it. But I think like, one, buying a pair of jeans, like salvage jeans that could potentially last you 5 to 10 years is very, very ethical, because at least I think so, right?
100%.
I may be wrong, but like, if you're wearing the same pair of jeans, like my goal, my dialed, like I love street fashion. That's kind of my thing, but I know that street fashion doesn't always make the right choices. It's kind of quick. It's always changing, but some of the aspects of fashion that I enjoy that I don't have dialed yet is like salvage jeans, like long-term, like classic wear, that you would buy like a pair of boots or a pair of jeans that you wear almost every day. They like actually wear out nicely. Like there's a lot of elements that I enjoy about that, but I'm struggling like to commit because it is much more expensive. But that's for like a pair of jeans that you may buy once every 5 years. What happens with things that you need to buy daily?
Yeah.
One, like coffee, you know, or I don't know, toothpaste, you know, those more common things. Like how do you make choices, like day-to-day choices? What are we looking for?
With those things, I do think too that there is less of a price discrepancy. Just like Mark was giving an example of like $12 coffee or $13 coffee. Like there's not as big of a price discrepancy between ethical and unethical. I don't love those terms, but I don't know of better ones. But it's like, what does it mean to be ethical? That means so many different things. But so give a little grace on the term. But I think there's less of a price discrepancy on the everyday use things. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial too. This is back to garments, but I think that if you were to buy like a Zara jacket, not a socially conscious brand whatsoever. If you were to buy a Zara jacket that you knew that you were going to wear for 10 years, like every day, that is going to be better than even buying something that is ethically made that you're going to get rid of after a year, because consumption is just as much of a problem in some senses as the way that something is made. Our level and rate of consumption, especially in the US, just in the West in general, is so rapid that the waste is a big problem. It has a huge effect on labor workers, everything. So I think when it comes to accessibility too with people, and my expertise is in the garment industry, if where you're at is that what you can afford is even like a Forever 21 jacket or an H&M jacket, I would say buy it knowing, or like with the intention of wearing it for 10 years and caring for it, like hand washing it, whatever it takes. Like that is also an ethical choice.
Well, for sure.
I've been thinking about actually something similar about how we've built an entire system, an entire economy on consumerism, on literally, if everybody stopped buying things tomorrow, the society would collapse. Like literally. And you know, it gets really challenging when like what we're experiencing right now in the economy in the last 2 years, where it's just been really made me think about like, oh no, like we actually haven't learned what it's like to just buy something and enjoy it and just be content with it. Where actually a big part of our culture is actually like we get dopamine out of clicking an order button, out of an unboxing, out of a new thing, there. And a lot of these things are actually, I mean, of course, these are very broad statements, not for everybody, but a lot of these things are just pointless. They're just useless, and they're just there to give us, some sense of pleasure of buying it. But I did want to clarify and ask you if you can kind of expound on that concept of like consumption is actually causing just as much problems in the industry, or something along those lines, where I was like, I kind of want to know a little more about that.
Yeah. Well, it's the consumption that is driving the fast fashion model. And so it's the level of consumption and what's become normal. And to your point, like what is popular in culture too, just like the unboxing and the, never be seen in the same outfit twice. And every time you go on a trip, it's like so normal to buy practically an entire new wardrobe, like an entirely new suitcase worth of clothes.
Call me out.
I mean, we all do it. Like I do it too. And that's a whole other part of the conversation we could have too, is not coming at this from a shame-based place, but actually coming from a place of curiosity and creativity around solutions. But so I don't say that with shame, but I say we are all a part of this consumption culture where it is so normal, and what it has created very rapidly. Like the fast fashion industry hasn't existed for a long time. It hasn't been like this for a long time. It's been like this for maybe 3 decades or so. Before that, clothing was made with much, much better materials. We think organic cotton is like an exciting new thing. Things used to only be made with organic cotton. Like the chemicals are new. Like the dyeing techniques are new. The way that we do things now that is harmful to both the humans who work with those materials and the environment and us when we wear them, really, when it comes down to it, is fairly new, and it all comes from this consumption culture of needing things new and fast and constantly.
Yeah. But there's also like consumption that is part of the solution. So to just rephrase what you already said to make sure I'm getting it right, but like buying things that you plan on wearing long term, which then also results in understanding the quality of things you buy. I think one of the things I learned as a kid is you always like, I don't know why I remember headphones like a big deal, and like buying 10 pairs of, I'm going to say it, Skull Candy headphones. Like I'm not going to call out a brand versus, but yes, like buying, or those, Walmart headphones that you have in a checkout line. They're like $5. Like, I guess snag another $5 pair of headphones. And they go out within like a month, you know what I mean? And then you have to buy more, which goes in a dumpster, creates more waste. But instead of like investing into maybe something that's higher quality, higher end, and buying something good that lasts you in a long time. So it's a different form of consumption, which is to a degree unpopular, am I right? Like in common culture. But I think depending on what circle you're in, that's also like there's value in that. And I don't know where I'm getting with this because I'm just like processing out loud.
Totally.
But those are, I think, big parts of the solution. How do you take one concept like consumption and instead of being part of the problem, becoming part of the solution? I think for me also within then coffee, one of the things about like purchasing like coffee beans is understanding the supply chain.
Yeah.
So what are some things about the supply chain that you're learning when it comes to what you're doing?
Oh my gosh. So much. So much. So I feel like I am sharing more on this podcast than I do with people typically about what I'm hoping to do because it's still fairly new. I've been working for maybe 6 to 8 months on a brand, but my vision and what I'm working toward is working with artisan groups around the world, as opposed to mostly women in factories. Very, very, very different model. But I am learning so much about textiles. So I never even thought about this, and maybe that's stupid, and maybe other people are going to be like, what? How can you say you're into fashion without thinking about this? But like every material has to be woven from nothing. Like I think about bolts of fabric, and that's like in my mind where clothing begins, but it doesn't begin there. It actually begins with being woven. And there are lots of ways to weave fabric. There's really, really cool, like slow, ancient, indigenous techniques of weaving fabric because people have worn clothes forever, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's really, really fast, dangerous ways to weave fabric.
Gotcha.
And so that's where it begins, is actually with the textile itself. And then once there is that bolt of fabric, then there's cut and sew. And that also can be done slowly and intentionally, and from women's homes and communities where it's looked down upon for them to work outside the home. And so they don't have opportunities to make an income until something like this is possible, where they can actually do that work from home. Or there's these like massive, super dangerous factories where cut and sew can occur.
Gotcha.
And all along the way, I mean, it might get boring for listeners, but like every single step, you can make a actually beautiful and celebratory and culturally relevant choice for the community where that's occurring, or you can do it a different way. And the issue is that it's so expensive to do it the slow way. And it's so not a part of what is common that you're almost looked at like you're crazy when you're doing it that way, because it requires so much initial investment.
Yeah. So then from a business point of view, to own a business and make it sustainable for you and the business, and then also make it sustainable on a broader spectrum, then you would have to like understand how to make proper markup according to a proper value to be able to make sure that there is consumption of a product that'll last longer. So that's, you also shared like one of the things that you're learning in school is more of also the business element of what that means. Is there anything you can share along those lines?
Yeah, that is where I do get really passionate about narrative, because I think especially our generation and younger really, really do care about how their goods are made, and really, really do care about both people and planet, but often are just overwhelmed with where to start. They oftentimes are just like, I don't even know, like there's all these buzzwords, what's true, what's not, this is so expensive, and like that we have kind of these narratives in our head about what is and isn't out of reach. And so that's where I get really passionate about educating the consumer and doing that in an ethical way, where there is like high levels of transparency. And when clothes are made well, goods are made well in general, they are going to be more expensive. And so having empathy toward the barriers that can create, but also educating around what it looks like to remove those barriers, because a lot of them can be removed when we change our consumer behavior. But it takes kind of breaking a narrative in your head around what isn't and isn't possible.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting. I really, I would, yeah. I think, what am I trying to say? Wake up.
This is decaf. You shouldn't have had decaf.
Set myself up for failure, folks. Decaf, that's excellent. You know, I'm very intrigued. Like, and I think, I was just thinking about this earlier today that, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I may say something that's just like politically incorrect. Oh God. But we are just, as a country, as an economy, we are just in such a blessed and great place that we can actually think about these things and actually have the ability to start changing how we think about what we're buying, as opposed to somebody who, you know, countries who just aren't quite there yet, where their mindset isn't quite there yet. It's more like, I hope I can have a piece of bread today, and I have to make ends meet somehow, you know?
Yeah.
And on top of that, I think where we are as a country also, like economically, and where we are in the kind of the realm of being a first world country and the things that accompany with that, is that I think also, where am I going? Holy crap. All right, folks, I'm getting there.
Everything you're saying, I'm like so tracking with.
Like, I'm like, oh gosh, land the plane. And there's so much privilege and such a beautiful responsibility that we can have. And I think actually a lot of the consumer, or us daily people who are buying things and who have the ability to buy things, I think we're actually moving into an interesting stage where we're not buying a cup because it's holding a coffee. We don't buy a cup because we need to drink water out of it. We're not, like, Sergi did not buy this pink Carter mug because there are no other no other coffee mugs in the world.
Right.
But we're becoming so much more intentional about our purchases, and it's becoming less about what it can do and more about what it stands for and what it means, and whether that's, you know, your favorite influencer has this bag and you want it to fit in with this, you know, the community, or it's like you want to wear, you know, a specific brand because you want to show everybody that, hey, you're sustainable, you know, or whatever it is, you know, like there are. And I think it also comes down to like a lot of these the brands that are being built around these things, where I think actually enables us to make a lot of impact, because we're just in a part where we're not thinking, I just need to put a shirt on. Right. We're actually now trying to identify with something. Yes. Does that make any sense?
100%.
Folks, I hope that finally got delivered.
You did land the plane. You did it. And it's so true, because, and that's actually part of the beauty of fashion. It's part of what I love about fashion. It's always been true that what we put on our bodies says something about us. That message has become more and more explicit over time, I feel like, with the evolution of fashion. But that's what fashion has always been about. It's actually the beauty and it's the art. And so I feel like we can almost, you know, make that a negative thing, but it's actually a really cool celebratory thing about fashion, is that it's expressing something about us. We're sending a message. And what you were saying as well, Mark, about like our country being in a privileged state, I would just add too that is because we're exploiting those other countries. Like the reason that we are in a state to choose what we do and don't want to buy with our money that we have is because of this exact problem that we're talking about. Like it is completely full circle. Every comment that you're making in my head, I'm just like, yeah, exactly. It's exactly what we're talking about.
I knew there was a politically incorrect comment in there.
No,
that brings clarity.
You're right. Like that. Yeah. I'm saying you're right.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, talking about like commodities, like again, like clothing in general is a commodity. Like everyone needs it. And I think, again, going to that idea of we get to choose, what coffee we buy. Do we want to buy, the carbonic macerated, like this coffee that is only produced to a limited run that runs for X amount of dollars versus, I just have coffee culturally, like, and that's part of the daily thing. It's an experience versus what coffee you choose. And I agree. I remember when I was going through my specialty coffee association training for coffee, one of the things they mentioned was the fact that countries that export the most coffee actually struggle with sustainability, not because the quantity of coffee that they export, but because they're not leaving that coffee for their own country.
Oh, interesting.
So there's that issue again. It's because, one, the market, and we get to, unfortunately, like this negative idea of capitalism where we get to use that privilege to actually steal, I know I'm using edgy terms, but steal resources and steal abilities from others to benefit this concept that we're talking about. So I think on like the bigger scale, like some of the practices that I've seen that like really like get me passionate is understanding what does that mean, like with talking to my buddy Taylor in Indonesia, who's working with very like small farmers. A lot of them are like women-owned farms, like things like that actually matter for that culture. And it's starting from the root of saying, what matters for that culture? Do they want to sell their coffee to the United States?
Right.
Like maybe it's not actually, they don't want to export it. Like, and that wouldn't be our place to be able to like take that coffee, because maybe the goal for them is actually to create a higher quality coffee so they can leave it in the country for the cafes there. And actually that will make them more money and more sustainable. So again, going back to where we began this conversation, it's all about relationship. Like in order for me to understand and know what this coffee producer or this farm needs, I have to embody the situation. I have to understand what's happening there on the spot in the moment.
Yes, that's exactly, I completely agree. Choice comes from power and privilege. And I think when we understand that when we have choices, it's because we have some level of power and privilege, and that's varying degrees for different people. But when we know that and can recognize that and accept that, then we can ask ourselves the important question of like, what does it look like to use my privilege for good? What does it look like to lay down my privilege in an effective and strategic way to uplift somebody else? But only when we first understand the privilege piece, then we can ask that question, and then we can ask that question to real human beings, right? Then we can have that relational kind of journey forward into like true solutions.
That's powerful.
For sure.
That's really delightful. But I also, we're like running up on like 15 minutes of this podcast. We'll have to have you back for sure, so we can dive into this some more. But as we wrap up the episode, we talked about buzzwords. You didn't like using ethical. We talked about brands that are exploiting or whatever. The base of this podcast is social entrepreneurship. You also talked about like educating the consumer, and there's so much to be educated on. I feel like today it's like you need to be educated on this cause, on this cause, on this cause, and you have to learn how to make a pour over with perfect extraction. And then tomorrow you need to do this. And
I'm always working on that.
And then all of a sudden now everybody needs to be a content creator, and you have to be Instagram famous or TikTok or where it's like there's so much, and it's so overwhelming that it almost feels like you have to know something about everything and all this stuff. That being said, like, can you offer like a couple, like 1 to 2 things? I know you mentioned it earlier in the podcast. 1 to 2 things that somebody that can just be a little more intentional about their purchases.
Yeah.
Like today, right now, without necessarily saying, hey, you need to go read this textbook, listen to 40 TED Talks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The number one thing I would encourage people to do is to determine like 1 to 3 values that are genuinely important to you. Not things you think you should care about, but things you actually care about. And so maybe that is that something is women owned. Maybe it's that something is BIPOC owned.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that the labor practices are fair and that's been verified by a third party. Maybe it's that it's having a neutral or positive environmental impact. There are actually brands having a positive environmental impact, which is insane. That's so cool. So whatever it is, what do you actually care about? 1 to 3 things. Keep it simple, especially to start out. And then start a note on your phone. Like this is like in the very nitty gritty. Start a note on your phone with brands that fit that value. So for me, it's ethical labor practices is like my number one most important thing. And so brands that fit that would be like Everlane, Reformation, Allbirds. Like there's all these brands in my phone that then anytime you do actually need something or you just want something, you go to that note in your phone and you're like, I'm going to check all these brands first to see if they have it. Like that's going to be my go-to because it makes it easy for yourself. And it also makes it fun. It's like a little treasure. And you're always on the lookout. You're talking to people about it and then it's getting the conversation going. You're learning about it. Like it just opens your eyes to both brands and sort of your own values, what it is you truly care about. And that's going to lead you to some really exciting places.
That also builds a framework for like making choices, which makes you a better chooser. You know what I mean? I mean, when I hear you say that, it actually, there's like, I feel like a sigh of relief, like whew, it's possible.
Yes.
Because sometimes topics like this are so big, so vast, and it's like, you're talking about, global economics, you're talking about like hot topics, and it's hard to be like, what part of the puzzle do I fit in? And how do I be part of the solution? But when you break it down to such practical steps, it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like this is possible. So like listening to this conversation, these 50 plus minutes that we're talking, I'm left like both convicted and inspired. I'm like, I need to tighten up in certain areas in my life, but I'm also like hearing what you have to say. And I'm like thinking that's actually very practical. I can do this. Like I can make that list. And next time I do want a pair of jeans, I either have to say, well, I don't need them, or I can say like, hey, like I can actually buy those jeans instead of just saying what's available.
Exactly.
So cool.
Exactly.
Super dope.
Nice.
10 out of 10.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Kenna, for coming on the podcast, for chatting with us. Once again, we're approaching 1 hour. Thank you for
Sorry, friends. I know I can be chatty on this topic, especially.
No, we appreciate that, and we needed that. So thank you so much for just sharing the knowledge that you have, which you know right now, your passion for it. I think we need people passionate about these things, who can make opportunities and make ways for change to happen in the world, and that's that's exactly what we're talking about. So thank you so much for chatting with us. Folks, I hope you guys all enjoyed this podcast as much as we have. Leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to these podcasts. Down in the comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit us up with some comments. Please, we love your comments. Send us a DM. Our emails are open. We want to continue the conversation. So thank you so much for listening, and we really hope you have a good one. And remember, friends, reflect what's good.
There it is.
Yes.
Did it. Yeah. Heck yeah.